Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. After he appeared to his followers in Jerusalem, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there were Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them,
I am going fishing.
And they said to him,
We will go with you.
They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them,
Children, you have no fish, have you?
They answered him,
No.
He said to them,
Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some.
So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter,
It is the Lord.
And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had taken it off, and then he jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them,
Bring some of the fish that you have just caught.
So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them,
Come, have breakfast.
Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, Who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter,
Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?
And he said to them,
Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.
Jesus said to him,
Feed my lambs.
A 2nd time, he said to him,
Simon, son of John, do you love me?
He said to him,
Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.
Jesus said to him,
Tend my sheep.
And Jesus said to him the 3rd time,
Simon, son of John, do you love me?
Peter felt hurt because he said to him the 3rd time, Do you love me? And Peter said to Jesus,
Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you.
Jesus said to Peter,
Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go.
He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, Follow me. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. In today's gospel reading, the center of the entire rather long story is change. And what we know about change is that change is challenging. Change is hard because it almost always involves loss, uncertainty, disruption, even when it is for the better. But not all change is the same. In fact, scholars note that there are two different types of change: technical change and adaptive change. Who's heard of these two different types of change before? Really? Wow, okay. Seriously, has anybody heard of the technical and... Okay. Your businesses need to work on leadership skills, which is probably a whole nother thing that you're like, yeah, they actually do. Anyway, so technical change, adaptive change. Technical changes are these easy solutions that often have apparent solutions, right? While adaptive changes require an alteration in beliefs and roles and relationships and approaches. In short, technical change is when you do something different. It's a quick change on something, while adaptive change is requiring you to think differently. And in today's gospel, we're going to look at these two different types of change because I think it's going to make even more clear what was going on in today's gospel. Okay, so first, right, we heard that there were some disciples. They were out fishing at night, a very commonplace. And then from the shore, Jesus tells them to put the net out to the other side. They listen, and they catch a whole lot of fish. So let's stop here. What kind of change is moving the net from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat? Is this technical or adaptive? Technical. Lovely. Technical. Are we kind of starting to get this? You're doing a thing, right? One side to the other. Doing. Easy. This is a quick, routine fix. It is doing something different. This is a technical change. In our lives, we love technical changes. They are so much easier than adaptive change. These are the things like the door lock is broken. We are going to replace it. If you're constantly late to work, you're going to try a new method or a new route to get there. Technical changes, they're simple, they're clear, they're doable, they're easy. But that was not the only type of change, technical change, that we heard in today's gospel. So let's go back to the story. We heard that Peter then put on his clothing and dove into the water, which is kind of odd, right? Anyway. Meanwhile, the other disciples, they were dragging in all of these fish, and then there was this holy barbecue on the beach. These disciples then noticed the presence of Christ at the water and a meal, which are both key things that should be making our little antennas shake as Christians, because these two things are key reminders of things that we do together. Because water reminds us of finding God in what? Baptism. This is going to be one of those sermons where you're going to interact. Some of you are going to hate this, some of you are going to love this. Baptism, just like Cameron's baptism just a few moments ago. And a shared meal will remind us of finding God in communion. Now, I could make a whole entire sermon on just these two images, but today we are going after a different catch. So let's dive deeper into this exploration of change, which is the root of the reading. Verse 14. Let's look at that one, because that one grabbed my attention. It said, "This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead." And that made me wonder, why, if they have already seen Jesus in the flesh twice already, why are they going about business as usual? Why are they going back to the familiar place? Why are they fishing? Where is their missional work, their preaching, their teaching, their sharing the gospel? These things that we think about when we think of the disciples following Jesus' resurrection. And I have to think that the reason that they go back to doing the same thing, the thing that was familiar, is that up to this point in the gospel, resurrection had been a technical change, right? Jesus was dead, now Jesus was alive. Dead, alive. That was an easy thing to do. And these, relatively speaking, right? It's a thing that you do, is probably what I should have said. After all, we often find these things that we do easier. It's easier to take a pill rather than cultivate a life of wholeness and healthy living. But the thing about resurrection is that while resurrection can be about a technical change, dead man living, right? Technical. Resurrection is almost always about adaptive change. Now, adaptive change is much more complex. Adaptive change is like when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And then Peter, did you catch it? In the same number of times that he denied Jesus, 3 times denied, 3 times he affirmed his love for Jesus. After each affirmation, Jesus instructed Peter to feed and tend his flock. Now, here we are, over 2,000 years later, we're like, well, duh, we know about sheep, we know, Jesus talks about it all the time, flock, shepherd, pope, all these people. But for Peter, this was something entirely new. You see, this is a new reality. Never has Jesus ever sent anyone but himself to feed the flock in John's gospel until this moment. In fact, the only other time that we hear about sheep in John is when Jesus notes his relationship to the sheep. He never says that the disciples have any particular relationship or responsibility to these sheep, not until this moment. And so this moment, this invitation was a change in how Peter saw himself and how he interacted with the world. Now, for Peter, making this change, this identity change, this more complex change, giving you hopefully some hints, is this technical or adaptive? Adaptive, lovely. This change was not easy, like throwing the net to the other side and hauling in a bunch of fish, right? Rather, Jesus was calling Peter to transform his identity. Instead of fishing, Peter would be invited to nurture a community, to reorient his life, and to embody the resurrection in an entirely new way. This was his moment of understanding that the resurrection can be technical, but it's almost always adaptive. And the thing about today's gospel reading is that as we read it and hear it, so too we are invited into it. We are invited to do that same work that Peter was invited to do. And I've seen this technical, adaptive change kind of coming together and blooming right here at Wicker Park Lutheran. After all, if you were here back in 2019, we had just begun our comprehensive building plan to create a place that would better serve the community's needs and the needs for the next generation. A lot of that, to be honest, came from a big flood we had, and we kind of had to make some tough decisions. But as we kind of went through this process, we saw how some of the current architecture of our building, while beautiful, it continued to be a barrier for full inclusion. So remedying that became a key part of our capital campaign called A Place for All. Now, so far, we've created the plan and we've begun raising money to install an elevator and an ADA accessible restroom. In the end, this will be a tangible, necessary action that will yield immediate results. This is the thing that we're doing. We're putting in an elevator. So what kind of change is this? See, now you all know this. You're going to go back to your jobs tomorrow, and you're going to be like, I know about technical and adaptive change. You do a lot of technical change around here. We need to work on the adaptive stuff. And then they'll say, oh, okay, do you want to work here anymore? That would be an adaptive change for you. And but anyway, technical change, putting in the lift. But the thing about our campaign is that it also invites us to rethink what it means to be welcoming and inclusive. Like Peter, we are being called to care for Jesus' flock. Like Peter, we are being called by God to be transformed from a place for some to a place of radical welcome and inclusion. Like Peter, we are called to embrace adaptive change as we participate in God's holy vision. And this adaptive work, this adaptive change, it won't always be easy. We will find that welcoming people with diverse abilities will require us to reflect on what has been the status quo in this place for 145 years for those of us who are able-bodied. It will mean that we will start seeing things throughout the rest of the building, the way that we interact, the way that we gather, that are still barriers, and we'll be confronted with this. It will mean that we will need to take seriously how all can participate in God's work in this place. It will require that we switch between technical change, putting in elevator, and moving towards adaptive change so that we might better join in God's vision for the world. And you see, that's the thing about this Easter season, these 50 days that we are in. The Easter season is about a substantial transformation. It requires more than a tweak. It's more than just a little thing to do. It's more than throwing a net over to the other side. You see, resurrection is about a complete overhaul of our mind, our body, our spirit. It's about realizing that our call is not to ourselves, and it's not only to our neighborhood or our city or our nation. Rather, we are called to feed and tend all of God's sheep across the globe. All of God's sheep. And yes, we can do that through a capital campaign, but we can also do it in our daily lives in a whole variety of ways. For example, when we work to mend a strained relationship by changing how we are approaching conflict and how we empathize with the other, that's the adaptive change process of resurrection. When we shift from ecologically destructive practices in fast fashion to acts of mending and reuse, like we'll explore after church today, that is transformational resurrection. When we align the way that we live with our values and our beliefs so that we might have safety and food and education for all people, well, that is changing our way of being, the status quo in our world, so that God's gift of abundant life might be shared by the many, by the all, instead of the few. You see, resurrection, while sometimes a technical, dead man, living man, Jesus, almost always, it is adaptive change. And the thing about all of this is that as we walk into these changes, whether good, whether difficult, as we walk into these challenges, technical, adaptive, we know that in the midst of change and challenge, God is always present with us. God is present in this holy meal as we gather. God is present in our baptismal calling and reminders. God is present in the world in the midst of all of the changes and unknowns. For we know that God gives us strength to adapt and the encouragement to embody that resurrection. So friends, as we move into this Easter season even more deeply, you and I, we are sent to care for Christ's world, following Christ's example, to truly tend to the entire flock, leaving not one out. So let us be challenged to follow Christ's example, to include all people, to feed all people, to clothe all people, to educate all people, to stand up when those who are being brought down and excluded, because that is the command of our God. But more importantly in all of that, let us continue to give thanks that we have a God who is about all of this adaptive change. Sure, a technical change and moment of resurrection on that first Easter Sunday. But the real story of resurrection is also about those moments of transformation and adaptive change that we see and we can experience each and every day. This is the gift from God. This is resurrection. This is the gift of God given to us so that we might have abundance of life. Thanks be to God for this gift. Thanks be to God for resurrection. Amen.